The titanic clash between North and South at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania immortalized many mundane components of rural American life. The peach orchard, the wheat field, Cemetery Hill. But one such location that has been neglected by most histories of the battle is the Brickyard. At the start of the decade, John Kuhns erected a house and brick operation on a 5-acre piece of land on the northern outskirts of Gettysburg. By 1863, Kuhns bricks had helped to build a handful of homes that some locals referred to as Kuhnstown. Surrounding the brickyard to the north was a rise in the terrain covered in wheat. In the early morning hours of July 1, 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg kicked off west of town. But by late afternoon, the Union line was quickly extending to protect the northern side of town from the arrival of the 2nd Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia, commanded by Richard Ewell. Soon, the Union right flank would extend right through Kuhn's Brickyard in the form of the 1st Brigade of the 2nd Division of the Union 11th Corps. Colonel Charles R. Coster was just 23 years old, but had already been through several battles, being wounded at Malvern Hill. He was the colonel of the 134th New York until the regiment was transferred into the brigade so Coster could relieve its former commander. Coster found himself going into Gettysburg commanding a divided brigade, consisted of his old unit and the 154th New York, along with the predominantly German 27th and 73rd Pennsylvania. After the defeat at Chancellorsville, the Germans of the 11th Corps became the black sheep of the Army of the Potomac. The Pennsylvania regiments were not too kind, having their German brigade commander relieved by a young man from New York City. Perhaps the one thing that keeping the whole brigade together was the fresh bread and sweet milk served to them by the nuns of the old convent in Evansburg, Maryland, in the morning of July 1st. After an 11-mile march, Coster's brigade took positions on the south side of town. General Howard, 11th Corps commander, held off entering them into the fight. It was not until Ewell's corps threatened the outflank the 1st and 3rd Divisions that Howard put them into action at 3:30 p.m. With the 134th New York in the lead, the brigade moved at the double quick through the streets of town. Easier said than done, as many had to push against the endless current of wounded pouring to the safety of buildings. As they moved up North Stratton Street, an artillery shell smashed into the side of the John Kuhns house, showering the brigade with bricks. Coster quickly realized the precarious situation they were placed in. Save for the post and rail fence on the north end of the property, there was no cover. Worsening matters, each regiment were down 50 men, for they had been detached on reconnaissance back in Maryland that morning. And, in a decision still not fully clear, the 73rd Pennsylvania were ordered to remain at the train station in town. Coster had less than 1,000 men to hold the Union right flank, standing at the foot of an incline. No sooner had Coster hastily deployed his troops, the rebel yell could be heard. Just a few hundred yards away, the battle flags of 2 Confederate brigades appeared. These were the Louisiana Tigers of Henry Hayes and the North Carolinians of Isaac Avery. Moving at full speed, there were a wave of gray and butternut that had no plans of stopping. Coster found his brigade to be outnumbered 3-1, but had to try and hold the ground. They fired the first volley, which briefly halted the Confederates, who returned fire. Hayes and Avery quickly continued to advance, hurrying to outflank Coster. Coster's men only got off as many as 9 rounds before cohesion broke down. Lieutenant Colonel Allen Jackson, in charge of the 134th New York, ordered the regiment to the retreat. Coster soon sounded for a general retreat, but in the smoke and chaos, the 154th had not heard the orders. They instead pulled back within the confines of the Kuhns operations. Brief hand-to-hand combat ensued until Hayes blocked their escape in the gateway out into the street. Much of the regiment surrendered. Others of Coster's brigade were chased through town. Some found shelter in nearby basements. Others begged the assistance of occupants to hide them. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson and a private hid in the loft of a house on York Street, where they would remain until the following night. The few who got out of the Confederates' reach hurried through town to the safety of Cemetery Hill. In less than a half hour, Coster's brigade had incurred 570 casualties. Half of that number were captured. The 154th New York suffered the worst, with a 77% casualty rate. But the brief fight at the Brickyard had stalled what Hayes and Avery's men thought would be an unopposed advance into town. It also burdened them with seeing to the care of large sums of prisoners. This delay provided precious minutes for other parts of the 11th and 1st Corps to retreat through town to Cemetery Hill, and for the arrival of reinforcements on the southern edge of town. By the nightfall on July 1st, the Army of the Potomac were digging in on Culp's and Cemetery Hills, thus leading to the most controversial order of the battle. Lee ordered Ewell to take the hill if practicable. Ewell felt it was not and brought his corps to a halt on the southernmost streets in front of the new Union line. In 1864, a 3/4 of an acre that paralleled the battle line of Custer's left flank at the Brickyard was purchased by the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association. Throughout the late 19th century, monuments to the 154th and 27th Pennsylvania were erected on what became known as Custer's Avenue. The 134th New York, whose position was not included in the land purchase, would have a monument instead upon Cemetery Hill. In 1895, ownership was transferred to the United States and has since been maintained by the Gettysburg National Military Park. However, the scenery has drastically changed. By the centennial of the battle, modern development had completely enveloped Custer's Avenue. In 1970, Mark H. Dunkelman, then a college art student, tracked down the location because of a familiar tie to the 154th New York. He came up with the idea to make the concrete wall of a nearby roofing company disappear with a mural depicting the moment Avery's brigade smashed into the 154th New York. He came into the acquaintance of Rhode Island muralist Bierman, and the two set to work gaining the necessary funds. The installation of the mural was easier said than done, as Dunkelman's car engine blew on his way into town. He also tripped and injured his knee while in the process of installing the mural. But finally, on the 125th anniversary of the battle, the mural was dedicated on location. The first mural was a proud commemoration, but gradually deteriorated. While Custer Avenue was still overlooked, one frequent visitor with tour groups was famed Civil War historian Ed Bears. During a meeting, Dunkelman asked Bears if he'd be willing to help in restoring the mural. The Bears Brigade made a sizable donation in 2001 for the restoration. For several weeks in October of 2001, Dunkelman and Bierman worked on site to bring the mural back to its glory. The 2002 rededication saw the largest crowd ever at Custer Avenue, including Bears and several descendants of the 154th New York. But once more, the elements took a toll on the mural. In 2015, a third restoration was undertaken. This time, a new mural design was painted to glass that will withstand the elements. During this project, Bierman injured his ribs in the same spot Dunkelman had tripped. So be mindful if you visit Custer Avenue. Old pieces of rebar from former fencing are obscured by the tall grass. If one is to visit Custer Avenue, I suggest paying the parking fee in the Racehorse Alley parking garage. Then head up roughly 4 blocks of North Stratton Street. You will pass John Coon's house. An artillery round is still lodged within the south side of the building. Custer Avenue will be on your right. The tall grass indicates the Park Service still overlooks a strip of land. But if you're looking for a part of history few people get to see, you will not be disappointed with a visit to the site of the Brickyard fight at Gettysburg.